I'm Vivian Rossi, 30, an editor in New York with an unshakable belief that journalism's highest duty is to protect the truth. But then came Richard Kane, the infamous media tycoon who twisted the magazine I once called home into a money-printing machine, a billion-dollar empire built on lies. He placed fabricated stories before me, demanding my signature to legitimize them, to fuel his dark political ambitions. I looked him straight in the eye and refused. Within minutes, everything I had built crumbled. My career, my reputation, even the trust I once held sacred. Kane thought I would break, but he was wrong. I had been preparing for this moment all along. Locked away in my drawer was evidence of $20 million siphoned from a shady defense deal he thought was buried forever. Now he sits on his throne of power, convinced he's untouchable. But Kane doesn't understand one thing: truth is the sharpest blade. And it will be the sentence that brings his empire of lies crashing down. On a gray morning in New York City, the tall glass towers shimmered faintly against the mist that still lingered above the streets. Inside one of those towers was the headquarters of Chronicle magazine, a publication that for decades had been considered one of the most trusted names in American journalism. People in the lobby carried stacks of newspapers under their arms, and the smell of roasted coffee drifted from a small kiosk near the revolving doors. It was the start of another day, but for me it already felt different. I was 30 years old now and had been serving as managing editor for nearly 3 years. Each day I told myself the same thing as I crossed the lobby floor: protect the truth. I walked past the security desk greeting the guard by name. He waved at me with a smile. I pressed the elevator button and adjusted the strap of my leather bag. I carried notebooks filled with scribbles, research notes, and outlines for upcoming issues. The elevator opened with a chime and I stepped in. A group of interns whispered nervously beside me, glancing at the tablet in my hand as though it were some sacred tool. I smiled at them kindly and said, "Do not worry, the newsroom always feels overwhelming at first." The elevator rose smoothly and soon opened to the editorial floor. The floor was alive with motion. Phones rang constantly, printers spat out pages, people rushed between cubicles and conference rooms. Screens glowed with breaking news banners. The energy was part chaos, part electricity. I breathed it in and felt the familiar rush. I had grown up in a family that valued knowledge and curiosity. My father was a school teacher and my mother a librarian. Dinner table conversations in my childhood home had often been about books, history, and the world beyond our little town. That background had shaped my sense of responsibility toward truth and information. As I walked through the maze of desks, people looked up to greet me. "Good morning, Isabella," someone called. I responded with a smile. I reached my office, which was simple but tidy. On the wall hung a framed quote that I kept close to my heart: "Journalism is printing what someone else does not want printed. Everything else is public relations." I often repeated those words to remind myself why I worked long nights, why I argued with executives, and why I refused to let sloppy stories through. Just as I set down my bag, James Miller entered without knocking. James was in his late 40s, tall with graying hair and a voice that carried weight. He had been with the magazine for over 20 years and was known for uncovering corruption cases that had once shaken entire city administrations. I respected him deeply and often thought of him as both mentor and ally. He placed a folder on my desk and leaned on the edge. "Morning," he said. "Got something brewing on the mayoral campaign finances. Some numbers are not lining up." I opened the folder, flipping through the documents. "This looks like your kind of puzzle." "You think it could be serious?" James gave a dry laugh. "When numbers vanish from financial disclosures, it is never innocent, but we need time to dig deeper." "Then we give you that time," I replied. "Accuracy over speed," James smiled. "That is why I like working with you. Most people just want a headline before lunch." We exchanged a look of quiet understanding. Then he left to chase down his leads. Moments later, Sarah Thompson appeared at the door. She was 25, a bright-eyed photo editor who had joined the magazine only a year ago. She often carried 2 cameras slung around her neck even when she was just walking across the office. Sarah had endless energy and an almost stubborn belief that journalism could change the world. She poked her head in. "Isabella, we just got word of a protest downtown. Do you want me to send a team or just pick up wires from agencies?" "Send a team," I answered. "First-hand coverage builds trust." Sarah grinned. "You got it." She darted away like a whirlwind of determination. By mid-morning, the editorial floor was buzzing louder. Screens flashed breaking news about international trade talks and sudden shifts in oil prices. The phones never stopped. I held a quick meeting in the glass-walled conference room. James gave updates on his investigation. Daniel Reed joined with notes for his political analysis column. Daniel was in his mid-30s, sharp suit, polished words, and an ambition that sometimes unsettled me. He had a way of phrasing things to make himself look indispensable. "The new ownership group is going to want stronger political coverage," Daniel said. "I heard they want more influence in Washington circles." I listened carefully. "Influence is fine as long as it is earned through facts, not favors." Daniel smirked slightly as if he knew something others did not but chose to keep quiet. Emily Carter spoke next. She handled the magazine's social media presence. At 28, she was savvy about online trends and had built a loyal following for Chronicle on several platforms. "People online are praising our long-form stories, but they are also asking why we are not covering the governor's new education plan more aggressively. Then let us look at it and decide based on merit," I replied. "We do not chase clicks, we chase truth." The meeting ended with a clear sense of direction. As everyone left, Emily lingered. "Isabella, I really admire the way you hold the line. Not many would in this climate." I smiled softly. "Thank you, Emily, we do it together." The day went on with its usual whirlwind of deadlines. By evening, I sat at my desk reviewing articles when I got a message from corporate, a mandatory meeting scheduled for the next morning with the new owner, Richard Kane. The name alone made my pulse quicken. I had read about him. A media tycoon with holdings in television, newspapers, and digital platforms, known for aggressive takeovers and rumored to be heavily connected to political figures. His arrival meant changes, and I was not sure they would be good. That night, I walked home through the busy streets of Manhattan. The lights glowed above me, the taxis honked, and people hurried past with tired faces. I stopped at a small diner near my apartment and ordered soup. Sitting alone, I opened my notebook and scribbled thoughts. Do not bend, do not let them turn truth into a tool. I closed the book firmly. The next morning, the entire office buzzed with whispers. Richard Kane was coming. Assistants rushed to set up the conference room. Flowers appeared at the entrance. Some employees adjusted their ties nervously. I watched calmly, though my mind churned with questions. At 10 sharp, Richard arrived. Tall, imposing, dressed in a tailored navy suit. His hair was slicked back and his smile was calculated. Cameras followed him as though he were a celebrity. He shook hands with senior staff, then walked into the conference room. Everyone followed. He began with a booming voice. "Chronicle has a proud legacy, and I intend to take it to greater heights. We live in a time where media must not just report the news but shape the conversation." I sat listening, my expression unreadable. I noticed Daniel leaning forward eagerly. James crossed his arms, unimpressed. Richard continued, "We need stories that command attention, stories that move the needle politically and socially. This is not just about facts, it is about influence." I finally spoke. "Influence without truth is propaganda. Chronicle's reputation is built on credibility. That must remain untouchable." The room went silent. Richard's eyes locked on me. A small smirk appeared on his lips. "I like passion," he said slowly, "but passion must be directed. I expect my team to understand the bigger picture." After the meeting, Richard left with his entourage. People whispered nervously in clusters. Daniel whispered to a colleague, "This could be my chance." James muttered under his breath, "This is going to be war." Back in my office, I sat at my desk staring at the skyline through the window. I felt the storm gathering. I did not know how far Richard Kane would go, but I knew one thing for certain: I would not surrender the truth. The week after Richard Kane's arrival, the atmosphere inside the magazine changed in subtle ways. The receptionist noticed more visitors in expensive suits. Assistants whispered about strategy calls with Washington. Meetings became longer and more tense. People who once joked freely in the hallway now watched what they said. The culture of the newsroom began to shift like sand under everyone's feet. I arrived each morning earlier than usual. I liked the silence before the chaos. Sitting in my office, I often reread the mission statement pinned on my bulletin board, serving the public interest with truth, accuracy, and independence. I whispered those words as though they were a shield. One afternoon, I was called into a smaller meeting with Richard. Only a handful of senior staff were invited. James sat beside me, his jaw set tight. Daniel was there too, looking far too eager. Richard leaned back in his chair and spoke with authority. "I want to talk about our upcoming cover story. We have an opportunity to hit hard against Senator Wallace. He is vulnerable right now. If we run a piece questioning his integrity, we can control the narrative. James raised an eyebrow. What integrity issue exactly, Richard? Richard's smile did not falter. Our partners have provided us with compelling information. Let us just say there are rumors of misconduct. I leaned forward. Rumors are not facts. We cannot publish unverified claims. Richard's eyes flicked toward me. Sometimes the impact of a story matters more than its details. James cut in firmly. That is not journalism, that is politics. The air grew heavy. Richard drummed his fingers on the table, then turned to Daniel. Daniel, what do you think? Daniel adjusted his tie. If the information leads us somewhere, we should pursue it. A strong headline could boost readership and influence. Richard nodded approvingly. Exactly, that is the spirit I need. My voice remained calm, though my heart pounded. If we do this without proof, we destroy our credibility. Our readers trust us to verify. If we betray that trust, we lose everything. Richard leaned forward, his tone lower but sharper. Miss Rossi, credibility is a flexible word. Influence is permanent. Think about which matters more in the long run. The meeting ended, tension thick in the room. As they left, James muttered to me, "We are walking into a trap." Back at my desk, I stared at my computer screen, unable to focus. I thought about my team. Sarah was out in the field covering stories with relentless enthusiasm. Emily was carefully curating Chronicle's online presence. They depended on me to protect the editorial line. I could not let Richard push them into propaganda. Later that day, Sarah rushed into my office, breathless from running the stairs. Isabella, I heard something. People are saying the new owner wants to turn us into a political machine. I sighed. It is worse than rumors. He wants us to publish unverified attacks. Sarah's eyes widened. That is insane. We would lose everything that makes us respected. We are not going to let it happen, I said firmly. The next few days were a battle of wills. Richard sent more memos pressuring us to pursue the Wallace story. He called for drafts even before any reporting had been done. Daniel circulated outlines that leaned heavily on speculation. James flatly refused to participate. Emily overheard heated conversations between executives about the editorial line. One evening, James knocked on my office door carrying a stack of papers. He dropped them on my desk. These are financial records from Wallace's campaign. I went digging. There are odd gaps, but nothing that proves wrongdoing yet. I looked through them carefully. You are saying there is smoke, but no fire, James nodded. Exactly. Enough to raise questions, but not enough to accuse. Then we wait, I said. We investigate fully. No story goes out until we have evidence. James gave me a small smile. That is why I trust you. Meanwhile, Daniel began whispering to younger reporters that I was holding back progress. He framed himself as someone who could deliver what Richard wanted. A quiet divide started forming in the newsroom. Some saw me as the last guardian of integrity. Others feared aligning with me would endanger their careers. Emily came into my office one night while most people had gone home. She closed the door quietly. Isabella, I should tell you something. I intercepted a draft memo from Richard's team. They plan to pressure you directly. They want you to sign off on a draft whether you like it or not. My jaw tightened. Do you still have the memo? Emily handed me a printed copy. I scanned it. The words were chilling. Push approval through editorial. Do not accept refusal. Replace leadership if necessary. I set it down slowly. Thank you, Emily. Keep this safe. The next morning, Richard summoned me alone. His office was now set up on one of the top floors with glass windows overlooking the city. He stood with his back to the skyline when I entered. Isabella, he said smoothly, I admire your commitment, but commitment without flexibility is stubbornness. This magazine is mine now. I expect cooperation. Cooperation with propaganda, I replied evenly, is betrayal of our readers. He turned to face me. You have talent. Do not waste it fighting battles you cannot win. Sign off on the Wallace piece and you will secure your future here. I stared at him. My future is not for sale. His smile thinned. Think carefully, Isabella. Careers are fragile. Loyalty is rewarded. Resistance is punished. I held his gaze. Then I guess I will live with the consequences. Richard's voice dropped lower. You will. I left the room, my heart racing but my resolve stronger than ever. That evening, I met James, Sarah, and Emily at a small cafe away from the office. We sat in a corner booth, speaking in hushed voices. James slammed his fist lightly on the table. This man is turning Chronicle into a weapon. Sarah whispered, What do we do? If we fight openly, he will crush us. I said, We gather proof. We document every attempt to manipulate us. If he pushes too far, we will have the evidence. Emily nodded. I will keep tracking the digital trail. Emails, memos, anything I can find. James looked at me with steady eyes. You know he will come for you first. I took a deep breath. Let him. If I fall, then at least I fall standing. The next week, Richard escalated his efforts. He called more meetings. He flattered Daniel publicly, giving him assignments that bypassed me. He sent private notes to staff praising compliance and warning against resistance. Yet through it all, I continued to hold the line. On Friday afternoon, Richard walked into the newsroom unannounced. He stood in the center, his voice carrying across the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to make history. Next week we will publish a story that will shake the political world. Reporters looked at each other uneasily. Sarah glanced at me with worry. James muttered under his breath, "This is a coup." I rose from my chair. I spoke loud enough for the entire room to hear. We will publish nothing that is not verified. Chronicle's legacy is not for sale. The room froze. Richard's eyes burned into me. The silent war had become visible to all. The silence after my declaration stretched across the newsroom like a heavy curtain. Reporters froze in their chairs. Assistants paused mid-stride with papers in their hands. Even the printers seemed to go quiet. Richard's jaw clenched as he stared at me. Then, slowly, a smile returned to his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. "Bold words," he said evenly. "I respect boldness. But remember, this is my house now, and in my house, my rules apply." He turned sharply and strode out of the room with his entourage following. The moment the elevator doors closed, the chatter exploded. "Did you hear what she just said? She is finished." "No, she is the only one brave enough to stand up to him. If she goes down, we all go down." I returned to my office without another word. I sat behind my desk trying to steady my breathing. I knew Richard would not forgive public defiance. But I also knew I could not take back my words. The line had been drawn. James came in and closed the door. "You just painted a target on your back." I met his eyes. "The target was already there, James. At least now everyone can see it." He nodded slowly. "Then we better be ready." The next few days felt like living under a storm cloud. Richard stopped speaking directly to me. Instead, he gave instructions through Daniel, who seemed to revel in his new proximity to power. Daniel strutted through the newsroom issuing directives with an air of authority he had never had before. Some staff avoided eye contact with me out of fear. Others whispered encouragement when no one else could hear. Sarah burst into my office one morning waving her phone. "Isabella, the headline draft just leaked on the internal system. They are going to run Wallace accused of corruption." I grabbed the phone, scanning the mock-up. There was no evidence, no sources, no verification. Just a bold accusation dressed up as fact. My stomach tightened. James walked in right then. "I heard they are going to force this through." "Not if I can stop it," I said. I marched to Richard's office, but his assistant blocked the door. "He is not available." "Tell him I said this story will not run," I demanded. The assistant gave me a nervous look. "I will tell him, but he said he does not take instructions from you." I returned to my office, my anger simmering. Emily slipped inside a few minutes later holding a folder. She whispered, "I pulled the metadata on that draft. It did not even come from our newsroom. It came from Kane Media headquarters." I opened the folder. There it was, clear as day. The so-called article had been written externally and pushed into our system disguised as editorial work. I closed the folder slowly. This is the proof we need. That evening, our group met again at the little cafe. James leaned across the table, his voice low. "If we reveal this, we can show that he is manufacturing stories. But we have to be careful," Emily added. "If he finds out I accessed the files, he will come after me." Sarah looked frightened but determined. "I will stand with you, Isabella." I listened to them all. "We are not ready yet," I said finally. "We need more. One document will not be enough. We must show a pattern." James nodded. "I will keep digging." The next day, Richard summoned me again. This time the meeting was in the boardroom with the entire executive committee present. The walls gleamed with wood paneling, and the long table reflected the overhead lights. Richard sat at the head like a king. "Miss Rossi," he began, "we are moving forward with the Wallace story. Your approval is expected by Friday." I folded my hands. "I will not sign off on lies." Richard's smile sharpened. "Then perhaps you do not belong here." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided my eyes. Daniel smirked at the far end of the table. I stood. If my choice is between my integrity and my position, then the choice is simple. I walked out, leaving the boardroom buzzing. The next morning, my termination email arrived, short and cold, effective immediately. When I came to clear my desk, the newsroom fell silent. Sarah rushed forward, tears brimming. "This is wrong, Isabella." James gripped my hand firmly. "You are not alone." Emily whispered, "I will keep gathering evidence." Daniel stood by, watching with a smug smile. "Good luck in your next endeavors, Isabella," he said smoothly. I ignored him. With my box of belongings, I walked through the floor one last time. Some reporters stood to applaud softly. Others bowed their heads. When I reached the elevator, I turned once more. "Do not forget," I said quietly to the room. "Truth matters." The doors closed. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by boxes. My phone buzzed with messages of support from colleagues and friends, yet I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down. I had no job, no income, and a powerful enemy. I sat on my couch staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I wondered if I had made a mistake. But then I opened the folder Emily had given me. I looked again at the metadata, the undeniable proof of manipulation. I thought of my father's words from long ago: "Integrity is the only wealth no one can steal." I whispered aloud, "I will not stop." The following week, Chronicle magazine launched the Wallace piece exactly as Richard wanted. The cover screamed accusations. The article spread across social media, fueled by Kane's network. But the backlash began almost immediately. Readers noticed the lack of sources. Fact-checkers called it flimsy. Loyal subscribers canceled in protest. Inside the newsroom, morale collapsed. Sarah texted me constantly about the despair. James told me the place felt like a morgue. Even Daniel looked rattled when the story drew ridicule instead of praise. Meanwhile, I began meeting quietly with allies. I called Olivia Brown, an independent journalist I had admired for years. We met in a bookstore cafe. Olivia listened intently as I explained everything. "If you have proof," Olivia said, "this is bigger than just one story. This is about the future of media." "I have some proof," I admitted, "but I need more." "Then let us get it," Olivia replied. Together, we began sketching ideas for something new. A platform free from corporate owners, free from political puppetry, a space for truth. At the same time, Michael Harris, a lawyer I trusted, reviewed the documents I had. "These memos show clear interference," he told me. "If you collect a few more pieces, we could build a legal case." I felt a spark of hope flicker inside me. Perhaps losing my job was not the end. Perhaps it was the beginning. The weeks after my firing felt like both a storm and a strange kind of silence. My mornings were no longer filled with the rush of deadlines and the hum of printers. Instead, I woke up to long stretches of uncertainty. Some days I sat by my window with a notebook in my lap, staring out at the endless stream of yellow cabs below. Other days I walked the city streets just to feel the energy of people moving with purpose. But even as I tried to steady myself, I could not escape the growing noise about Chronicle. News outlets and online forums were buzzing. Readers criticized the Wallace story. Loyal subscribers canceled en masse. The reputation that had taken decades to build was unraveling in weeks. I felt sadness like a stone in my chest, but also a fierce vindication. The truth had a way of showing itself. One cold evening, I met James at a small bar tucked away on a quiet side street. He looked tired, older than I remembered. He took a sip of his drink before speaking. "Chronicle is falling apart," he said. "Staff are miserable, readers are leaving in droves, and Richard is furious. He is blaming everyone except himself." I stirred the straw in my glass. "He will not stop. He will double down until the whole thing burns." James leaned closer. "Which is why we cannot just sit back. We need to fight him." "I know," I said softly. "Olivia and I have been talking about building something new." James's eyes lit up. "Independent media?" "Yes, nonprofit. Funded by readers, not corporations, transparent, accountable." He let out a low whistle. "That is ambitious." "So was Chronicle once," I replied. James nodded slowly. "Count me in." Meanwhile, Sarah continued sending me photos and messages from inside Chronicle. Pictures of empty desks where reporters had quit, screenshots of angry subscriber emails, snippets of meetings where Richard ranted about loyalty. Sarah wrote, "This is not the place I joined. Without you, it has lost its soul." Emily also stayed in contact. She quietly forwarded me internal notes showing further manipulation of editorial content. Every message came with the risk of exposure, but Emily insisted, "If we do not keep a record, then it all disappears," she said in one late-night call. I thanked her. "You are braver than you know, Emily." Daniel, however, had become Richard's favored ally. He appeared on panels defending Chronicle's coverage. He smiled smugly on television as he declared that Chronicle was stronger than ever. Inside the newsroom, though, even he could not hide from the sinking morale. Reporters whispered that he was selling his soul for a promotion. One morning, I received a call from Michael Harris, the lawyer. He spoke with calm precision. "I reviewed the documents again. They are strong, but we need more." If we can connect Richard's directives directly to the published story, we can argue editorial interference with intent to mislead the public. I tapped my pen against my desk. That means we need emails showing he ordered the Wallace piece specifically. Exactly, Michael said. Do you have allies inside who can get them? I thought of Emily. Yes, but I do not want her exposed. Then proceed carefully, Michael advised. That evening, I met Olivia again at the bookstore cafe. We spread out papers across the table. Olivia had been speaking with other journalists disillusioned with corporate media. She introduced me to two of them. One was a tech reporter named Leo Martinez, who had left a major online outlet after refusing to write clickbait. The other was a veteran war correspondent named Carol Simmons, who wanted her last years in journalism to mean something. I listened to their stories. Carol said bluntly, "I am tired of seeing the truth twisted." "If you build this platform, I am in." Leo added, "I know how to handle digital infrastructure. I can make sure the site is fast, secure, and resistant to takedowns." I felt my heart lift. The team was forming, but even as we planned, the danger grew. One night, Emily called in a whisper. "Isabella, Richard suspects there is a leak. He is tightening access to systems. I will not be able to keep sending documents much longer." "Stay safe," I urged. "Do not risk too much." "I am already in this," Emily replied firmly. Days later, another headline exploded from Chronicle. A new piece attacked Wallace with even bolder accusations. This time, Richard himself appeared on a television interview praising the story. But within hours, watchdog organizations debunked major claims. The backlash was fiercer than before. Hashtags calling for boycotts trended online. Even some advertisers pulled out. James called me that night. He sounded almost triumphant. "He is sinking his own ship." "Yes, but he will not go quietly," I replied. "He is too powerful to underestimate." Meanwhile, Olivia encouraged me to think bigger. "Do not just react to Kane," she said. "Build your platform as if he does not exist. Focus on the readers, focus on trust." I nodded. I began drafting a manifesto of sorts, a statement of principles for our new platform: truth above profit, transparency in funding, community involvement. Journalism as a public service, not a commodity. I wrote late into the night, my pen racing across the pages. Soon Sarah quietly resigned from Chronicle. She showed up at my apartment with her cameras slung over her shoulder. "I cannot stay there," she said. "Every picture I take feels like part of a lie." I hugged her tightly. "Welcome home, Sarah." Emily followed a week later. She arrived with a flash drive clutched in her hand. "I got it," she whispered. The emails linking Richard directly to the Wallace story. My eyes widened. This is it. That night we gathered in my living room: James, Sarah, Emily, Olivia, Leo, Carol, and Michael, the lawyer. Papers spread across the table, laptops open. The room buzzed with determination. James raised his glass of water. "To truth," he said. "To truth," we echoed. For the first time since losing my job, I felt not just hope but conviction. We were no longer scattered individuals. We were a team. And we had a mission. Outside, the city lights flickered. Inside my apartment, the seed of something new had been planted. The winter air was sharp as I walked briskly toward the rented office space in Lower Manhattan. It was nothing more than two connected rooms above a bookstore, but to me and the small group it felt like the beginning of something vast. The walls were bare, the furniture mismatched, but the energy inside was undeniable. On the whiteboard, someone had scrawled in thick marker, "Truth has no owner." James sat at a desk typing furiously on his old laptop. Sarah pinned photos onto a corkboard, arranging them into timelines. Leo fiddled with wires and servers in the corner, muttering about firewalls and backup systems. Olivia and Carol debated editorial policies, while Emily cataloged the files she had smuggled out of Chronicle. Michael arrived carrying a stack of folders thicker than his arm. I looked around and felt pride swell in my chest. This was no longer a dream whispered in cafes. This was real. "All right," I said, clapping my hands lightly. "Let us get to work." We began building piece by piece. Leo set up a secure website with encrypted channels. Emily created social media accounts under the new brand name we had chosen, The Beacon. Sarah designed a logo, simple and bold, a shining light cutting through darkness. Olivia wrote the first draft of our mission statement, which I edited late into the night until the words felt strong enough to carry our vision. But outside our small office, the world kept moving. Richard Kane continued to push Chronicle deeper into propaganda. Another issue attacked Wallace relentlessly. Another issue praised politicians aligned with Richard's interests. Viewership numbers dropped, subscribers canceled, advertisers fled. Still, Richard pressed on, convinced he could bend reality by sheer force. Daniel, meanwhile, enjoyed his new role as the face of Chronicle. He appeared on talk shows, smiling smoothly, insisting the magazine was more relevant than ever. He posted photos of himself at expensive dinners with politicians. Yet deep down, he noticed the cold stares of colleagues who no longer respected him. Back at the Beacon, we worked day and night. Sarah covered local protests, photographing not just the chaos, but the faces of ordinary people. I chased financial records linking Richard's companies to shadowy donors. Carol wrote essays about the moral cost of war and corruption. Olivia reached out to younger reporters, offering them a home. One night I sat with Michael reviewing the evidence Emily had brought. Emails were damning. Richard's direct orders to manufacture stories, his coordination with political operatives, his threats to replace editors who resisted. "This is enough," Michael said quietly. "Enough to build a legal case, enough to blow this wide open." I nodded, but my heart was heavy. Exposing Richard would mean all-out war. He had money, power, and influence. He could try to destroy us before the truth reached the public. I looked around the office. My friends were exhausted but determined. I realized that we were already at war whether we admitted it or not. The Beacon's first issue launched online on a rainy Tuesday. We released a series of investigative reports backed by documents, Sarah's photographs, and James's meticulous analysis. The lead story revealed the interference inside Chronicle, showing how Richard Kane had ordered unverified attacks for political gain. Screenshots of emails, names, dates, everything laid out clearly. The response was electric. Readers shared the stories rapidly. Social media buzzed with outrage. Other outlets picked up the reports. Suddenly, the Beacon was no longer a tiny unknown site. It was a force. I watched the numbers climb on the website analytics. Thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of readers. My hands trembled slightly as I realized the reach, but with success came retaliation. Within days, Richard's allies attacked the Beacon publicly. Articles appeared calling us disgruntled ex-employees. Anonymous accounts spread rumors that I had been fired for incompetence. Lawsuits were threatened. Servers were targeted with cyberattacks. Leo stayed up nights reinforcing our systems. "They are throwing everything at us," he muttered, eyes bloodshot. "But we will hold." I gathered the team. "This is what happens when you tell the truth," I said. "They fear us. That means we are making a difference." James chuckled dryly. "Never thought I would see the day we rattled a billionaire from a room above a bookstore." Sarah grinned. "Truth is louder than money." Emily lifted her phone. "Look at this. People are donating small amounts to keep us alive. $10, $20, $50, thousands of them." Tears stung my eyes. They believe in us, but the danger kept growing. One evening, as I left the office, I noticed a black car parked across the street. The same car appeared the next 2 nights. James walked with me once and muttered, "Someone is watching you." "Do not worry," I said, but my heart pounded. Later that week, Richard went on television. He smiled confidently as he called the Beacon a fringe site run by bitter failures. He declared that his magazine remained the gold standard of journalism. But as he spoke, I noticed the defensive edge in his voice. He was rattled. Meanwhile, Olivia secured an interview for me on an independent radio program. I spoke calmly about why I left Chronicle, why truth mattered more than influence, and why the Beacon existed. The phones lit up with callers praising our courage. One caller said, "Thank you for reminding us what journalism is supposed to be." After the interview, I sat quietly with Olivia. "Do you think we can really survive this?" I asked. Olivia looked me in the eye. "Survive? Yes. Thrive? Absolutely. Because people are starving for honesty." In the following weeks, the Beacon grew rapidly. More reporters joined, drawn by the promise of independence. Donations poured in. Our stories exposed corruption not only in Richard's circle, but also in other institutions. Readers began calling us a lighthouse in the fog, yet the fight with Richard was far from over. Behind the scenes, Michael prepared legal filings. Emily uncovered more documents tying Richard directly to political donors. James whispered about a bigger scandal brewing, one that could dwarf everything so far. One evening, as we gathered to plan our next steps, James laid down a folder. "I think I found it," he said. "The bigger picture." We all leaned forward. "This is not just about Wallace. It is about a network of money flowing through shell companies into campaigns, and Richard is at the center." The room went silent. I felt the gravity of his words. This was bigger than I had imagined. I looked at my team. "Then we go after the whole truth," I said, "no matter how dangerous." Everyone nodded. The decision was made. The battle lines were clear now. On one side, a billionaire determined to control narratives. On the other, a small group of journalists fueled by conviction. And in between, the public waiting to see who would prevail. The Beacon's small office hummed with restless energy. Everyone felt the weight of James's discovery. The documents he had laid on the table were not just scraps of information, but a map leading into the dark heart of political corruption. Shell companies, anonymous donations, money trails weaving across states. At the center stood Richard Kane, his fingerprints faint but unmistakable. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the evidence. The room was quiet except for the faint buzz of Leo servers. Finally, I spoke. If this is real, then it is not just about a bad story at Chronicle. It is about a system designed to deceive voters. James nodded gravely. And Kane is not just a publisher. He is a power broker. Michael tapped his pen against the folder. If we can verify this, we are not just writing a story, we are building a case that could bring legal consequences. Sarah frowned nervously. Which means he will come after us harder than ever. Carol crossed her arms. That is what journalism has always been. The truth makes enemies. I looked around the room. We need to divide tasks. James, keep digging on the money trail. Sarah, document everything visually. Emily, organize the digital files into a secure archive. Leo, protect us from cyberattacks. Olivia and Carol, start drafting the narrative. Michael, prepare the legal strategy. And you, Vivian? James asked. I took a deep breath. I will hold us together, and I will be the one to face Richard when the time comes. The days blurred into long hours. James pored over campaign finance reports, highlighting inconsistencies. Sarah traveled across the city, photographing offices tied to shell companies. She snapped pictures of empty buildings that supposedly housed million-dollar firms. Emily cataloged the files, creating an encrypted library that could survive any attack. Leo muttered constantly as he patched vulnerabilities and set up backups on hidden servers. Olivia interviewed whistleblowers, while Carol crafted essays contextualizing the corruption in the broader political landscape. I floated between them, offering guidance, encouragement, and sometimes just coffee. I knew my role was more than editor now. I was the anchor. One night, as the team worked late, Emily gasped. She had uncovered an email chain that tied Richard directly to a political operative. The language was blunt: push funds through the third shell, ensure coverage favors our allies. Chronicle will carry the story as planned. She printed it out, hands trembling. This is it, she whispered. The smoking gun. We gathered around the printer, staring at the pages. Michael exhaled slowly. With this, we can prove intent. I looked at my team. We are closer than ever, but this also means the danger just doubled. The very next day, the Beacon's website came under its fiercest cyberattack yet. Waves of traffic flooded the servers, attempting to crash them. Leo shouted over the noise of clacking keys. They are throwing everything they have. State-level resources, maybe? Can you hold? I asked. Leo's eyes blazed with focus. I will hold. He worked through the night, fueled by coffee and determination. By dawn, the servers were battered but still standing. Meanwhile, Richard launched a smear campaign. Billboards appeared accusing the Beacon of bias. Television ads called me a failed editor, bitter over my firing. Social media bots spread lies about my personal life. Threatening messages arrived by the hundreds. I sat in my apartment, reading them one by one. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I dragging my friends into danger too great? I closed my eyes and remembered my father's voice. Integrity is the only wealth no one can steal. The next morning, I walked into the office stronger. We are not stopping, I told my team. Olivia grinned. That is the Vivian I know. Soon, we decided to publish the first part of the corruption story. It was carefully sourced, meticulously verified. The article laid out the shell companies, the suspicious money flows, and the connections to Richard Kane. We did not overstate. We let the facts speak. When the story went live, the internet erupted. Major networks covered it. Politicians demanded investigations. Hashtags praising the Beacon trended worldwide. Donations doubled. Readers wrote messages thanking us for our courage. But backlash followed quickly. Richard called the story fake news. He filed a lawsuit claiming defamation. His lawyers sent threatening letters to me and Michael. On television, Daniel sneered dismissively. This so-called investigation is nothing more than the ramblings of bitter ex-employees. James watched the interview, shaking his head. He has sold his soul completely. Sarah snapped a photo of the TV screen. History will not be kind to him. Despite the noise, the impact was undeniable. Lawmakers announced hearings. Watchdog groups amplified the Beacon's findings. Ordinary people filled forums with discussions about corruption. For the first time, Richard looked vulnerable. One evening, I received a call from a blocked number. I answered cautiously. A voice whispered, "You do not know me, but I have information. Meet me tomorrow night near the old train station." The line went dead. I sat frozen, phone in hand. Was it a trap or a whistleblower? I called James immediately. "We will go together," he said. The next night, under the flickering lights of the deserted station, we waited. A man in a hood approached nervously. His voice shook. I worked for one of Kane's companies. I saw the money transfers. I kept copies. He handed me a flash drive, then hurried away before we could ask questions. Back at the office, Leo scanned the drive. His eyes widened. It was full of documents, spreadsheets, and emails tying millions of dollars to political campaigns, with Richard orchestrating everything. Michael whistled low. "This is more than enough to bury him." I held the drive tightly. "Then let us make sure the world sees it." The Beacon prepared our biggest release yet. We worked round the clock, fact-checking, verifying, cross-referencing. We knew once we published, there would be no turning back. The night before launch, we gathered in the office. The city lights glowed through the windows. I looked at each of them one by one. "I cannot promise safety," I said, "but I can promise this is the truth." James raised his glass again. "To truth." "To truth," we echoed. At midnight, I pressed publish. The world would never be the same again. When the Beacon's second major exposé went live, it was like striking a match in a room filled with gasoline. The article detailed the secret transfers, the shell companies, the emails, and the spreadsheets from the whistleblower's flash drive. The writing was crisp, clear, undeniable. Within hours, the story dominated headlines across the internet. News anchors quoted passages verbatim. Political commentators argued furiously on television. Ordinary citizens shared the link until the servers strained under the weight of traffic. I sat in the office, watching the numbers climb on the analytics dashboard. 10,000 readers, 50,000, 100,000. Then the counter spun so fast it blurred. My heart pounded. "We did it," I whispered. James leaned over my shoulder. "No, Vivian, we started it." By morning, lawmakers announced an emergency inquiry into Richard Kane's companies. The Department of Justice released a statement saying it would review the allegations. Activists organized marches demanding accountability. The name Beacon trended on social media alongside the word hope. But the storm of praise came with thunderclouds of retaliation. Richard appeared on primetime television, his smile stretched thin. "This is a coordinated smear campaign," he declared. "These so-called journalists are fabricating documents to push their agenda." The host asked, "Do you deny that these emails came from your companies?" Richard's jaw tightened. "They are taken out of context. None of it proves wrongdoing." Watching from the office, Sarah snorted. "He looks like a cornered animal." Emily tapped her laptop. "The emails are authentic. I verified the metadata myself." Carol added quietly, "Authenticity will not stop him from trying to destroy us." Indeed, the counterattacks came fast. The Beacon's bank accounts were frozen briefly after suspicious complaints. Anonymous threats poured into our inbox. Someone spray-painted traitors on the door of our building. A smear article accused me of taking foreign money, though no evidence was given. I stood before my team. "This is intimidation. It means we are over the target. Do not lose focus." Michael warned, "The lawsuits are real, though. Kane's lawyers are filing motions in multiple states. They want to bury us in paperwork." "Let them try," I said firmly. "We will answer with more truth." Days turned into a blur of work and tension. James chased new leads linking Richard to senators. Sarah traveled to photograph abandoned buildings tied to shell corporations. Olivia wrote editorials defending independent journalism. Carol penned searing columns about the cost of silence. Emily built secure backups of all files. Leo reinforced our servers after yet another attempted hack. Through it all, I held press conferences, giving calm statements. I spoke directly to the public, not just as a journalist but as a citizen. "We deserve to know who controls our politics," I said in one interview. "Information is power and no one should own it." Her words resonated. Donations kept flowing. Messages of support filled our inbox. Parents wrote saying, "Thank you for showing my children what courage looks like." Retired journalists sent letters praising our stand. But the pressure on Chronicle grew unbearable. Readers abandoned it. Advertisers withdrew. The once-proud magazine became a hollow shell filled with propaganda no one believed. Inside the newsroom, Daniel tried to hold morale together, but his colleagues looked at him with contempt. Sarah's departure had been a blow, Emily's too, and James's absence was like losing a pillar. Without them, the staff knew the truth. Chronicle had lost its soul. One evening, Daniel sat in his glass office staring at the empty desks around him. He picked up the latest issue of Chronicle, its cover a desperate attack on the Beacon. He saw his own byline under the headline and felt a flicker of shame. For the first time in months, he wondered if he had chosen the wrong side. Meanwhile, my team pressed forward. James uncovered another crucial lead, a memo showing Richard's plan to use Chronicle not only for political smears but also to cover up a massive corporate fraud involving government contracts. He slammed the folder on the table. This is the real story. Wallace was just a distraction. The smear campaign was cover for a theft worth billions. The room went silent. I picked up the memo, hands shaking slightly. If this is true, it changes everything. Michael adjusted his glasses. With this evidence, Richard could face not just lawsuits but criminal charges. Carol whispered, then we are standing on the edge of history. I looked at my team. Then we keep going, we publish. But before we could prepare the next release, the attacks escalated. Late one night, as I left the office, the same black car from before followed me for several blocks. I ducked into a crowded diner until it drove away. Sarah received anonymous phone calls with silence on the other end. Leo discovered spyware hidden in our systems. Emily's social media accounts were hacked. We gathered the next morning, shaken but determined. I said softly, he wants us scared. We cannot give him that victory. James growled, I have been in this business 30 years, I am not about to run now. That night I received another call from the whistleblower. His voice trembled. They know I spoke to you, I have to disappear. But remember, there is more hidden in the files. Dig deeper. Then the line went dead. I sat frozen, clutching the phone, another life endangered by this fight. The next day, Olivia suggested going public with everything at once. Release every document, every file, let the people see it all. Michael cautioned that dumping raw data could endanger innocent employees. We must filter carefully. But yes, the clock is ticking. So we worked around the clock. Emily organized files, James cross-checked names, Carol wrote introductions. Sarah prepared images. Leo created a secure portal for the public. Finally, on a Sunday morning, we released the Beacon files, a massive archive of documents, emails, and memos exposing Richard Kane's empire of manipulation. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The files spread faster than anyone could control. Other journalists combed through them, publishing their own stories. Activists flooded the streets. Lawmakers demanded hearings. The Department of Justice issued subpoenas. I stood before the cameras outside the courthouse that week, my voice steady. This is not about me. It is not about Richard Kane. It is about whether truth still has a place in our democracy. The crowd erupted in applause. Inside, Richard appeared for questioning, his face pale but defiant. He denied everything. He accused the Beacon of treason. But the weight of evidence pressed down like a mountain. Even his allies began to distance themselves. At night in the office, I watched the news coverage with my team. Sarah leaned against my shoulder, whispering, "We did it." "Not yet," I said. "This is only the beginning." The release of the Beacon files changed everything. For the first time in decades, the country witnessed a media tycoon being dragged into the light. Newspapers that once ignored Richard Kane now splashed his name across their front pages. Television networks debated his downfall every night. Senators held hearings with cameras rolling. People marched in the streets, carrying signs that read "Truth Matters" and "Thank you, Beacon." In our small office above the bookstore, we sat glued to our screens. News anchors replayed my courthouse speech again and again. Clips of James explaining the money trail went viral online. Sarah's photographs of abandoned shell company offices appeared on front pages worldwide. Emily scrolled through social media with tears in her eyes. "People believe us," she whispered. But with visibility came new risks. Anonymous threats multiplied. Protesters gathered outside our office, both supporters and detractors. Police cruisers began to circle the block regularly. I thanked the officers but kept my focus on the work. One evening, Michael spread legal documents across the table. "These subpoenas are the real turning point," he said. "Kane cannot hide behind rhetoric anymore. He will have to turn over records." James lit a cigarette near the open window, despite the office rules. "That means he will fight like a cornered wolf." "He already is," Sarah muttered. "My neighbor told me 2 men were asking about me in the building." I put a hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone. We protect each other." That night, I walked home with Olivia. The city air was crisp, the lights bright. She said, "You realize what you have done. You turned a magazine firing into a national reckoning." I shook my head. We all did, and it is not finished. Meanwhile, inside Chronicle, the mood had turned grim. Once bustling with pride, the newsroom felt like a ghost town. Advertisers had fled, subscribers canceled, staff resigned. Daniel sat at his desk, staring at an empty inbox. His articles no longer drew attention. His colleagues no longer respected him. He felt the walls closing in. Richard still barked orders, but his empire was crumbling. He stormed through the newsroom demanding loyalty, threatening jobs. In a meeting, he slammed his fist on the table. "Chronicle is still the flagship?" he shouted, but the eyes staring back were tired and doubtful. Late at night, I walked past the printing floor. I saw stacks of unsold magazines. Covers that once defined the national conversation now lay untouched. For the first time, I admitted to myself that I had chosen the wrong side. Back at the Beacon, the work did not stop. James continued tracing the money trail now reaching into offshore accounts. Sarah traveled to Washington photographing hearings. Carol wrote essays connecting Kane's downfall to the broader corruption of politics. Olivia coordinated interviews with independent outlets. Emily built a secure digital vault ensuring every file would survive. I kept my focus on the team. I reminded them to rest, to eat, to breathe. But I slept little myself. Each night I sat at my desk rereading our mission statement. Journalism is a public service, not a weapon. Then came the plot twist no one expected. During one of the hearings, a senator revealed a sealed document. It showed that the Wallace smear campaign had been launched to distract from a massive corruption scandal involving defense contracts. Billions of taxpayer dollars had been funneled through Kane's companies into private accounts. The room gasped. Cameras flashed. Richard's lawyers stammered. Watching on television, my team sat in stunned silence. Sarah whispered, "So that was it." Wallace was never the real target. He was just a smokescreen. James nodded grimly. "We always knew there was more, now we see the size of it." Michael said, "This changes everything. We are not just talking about media ethics, we are talking about theft on a historic scale." I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them with determination. Then we chase it, all of it. The next days were chaos. News outlets worldwide reported the defense contract scandal. Lawmakers demanded resignations. Stock market shook as Kane's companies plummeted. Protesters flooded the streets, chanting his name with anger. The Beacon became the go-to source for updates. Our website crashed twice under the surge of traffic. Leo patched it each time, muttering, "We are running on adrenaline and coffee." Meanwhile, Richard grew desperate. He appeared on television, red-faced, shouting about witch hunts. He accused me personally of treason. He claimed the Beacon was funded by foreign enemies. But his words fell flat. The evidence was too overwhelming. Inside the office, I gathered my team. "This is the moment," I said, "but it is also the most dangerous moment. Kane will lash out with everything he has left." James smirked grimly. "Let him try. We are not backing down." That night, I walked alone to clear my mind. I passed posters taped to walls with my face on them. Some praised me as a hero. Others painted me as a villain. I felt the surreal weight of becoming a symbol. I whispered to myself, I am just a journalist, but deep down I knew symbols were what people needed in moments of crisis. The following week, the Department of Justice announced formal charges against Richard Kane: fraud, conspiracy, manipulation of media, interference in elections. The press conference was broadcast nationwide. Crowds outside the courthouse cheered. In our office, my team erupted in applause. Sarah hugged me tightly. "We did it." "Not yet," I said quietly. "Justice is slow." But the truth is finally out. Daniel watched the news from his empty office at Chronicle. He felt a hollow ache in his chest. He had chased power and lost everything. He typed a resignation letter but then deleted it. He was not sure if anyone even cared anymore. Meanwhile, donations to the Beacon soared. Readers called us a lifeline. Universities invited me to speak. Young journalists applied in droves wanting to join. The small office above the bookstore overflowed with energy. Yet I remained cautious. I told my team, success is not measured in headlines. It is measured in trust. We must never forget why we started. James raised a glass once more. "To trust." "To trust," they echoed. The fight was far from over. But Richard Kane was cornered. His empire collapsing, his reputation shredded, his future uncertain. The Beacon had done what few believed possible. And I had proven that one voice refusing to bend could spark a movement strong enough to shake the foundations of power. The morning after the Department of Justice announced charges against Richard Kane, the city felt different. The air buzzed with conversation. People in cafes whispered over newspapers. Taxi drivers debated loudly with passengers. Subway riders scrolled through their phones reading updates. It was as if the entire nation had been shaken awake. In the Beacon's modest office, we gathered early. Sarah brought bagels and coffee. James dropped his coat on a chair and immediately began marking up the latest court filings. Emily checked the website traffic with a grin. "We are passing 1 million readers a day," she announced. "1 million?" James repeated, shaking his head. "From a room above a bookstore." I smiled faintly. Numbers matter, but what matters more is trust. If they trust us to tell the truth, we must honor that every single day. Carol lifted her notebook. "I want to write about what this means for journalism itself. The collapse of Chronicle is more than a scandal. It is a warning." "Do it," I encouraged. "Let people see the bigger picture." Meanwhile, Olivia coordinated interviews. Reporters from international outlets wanted to speak with me. Invitations poured in for conferences and panels. Universities asked me to lecture. Politicians wanted meetings. I declined most of them. I kept repeating to the team, "We are not the story." The story is the truth we uncovered. But inevitably, I myself became a symbol. Magazines ran profiles of me, calling me the fearless editor. Social media filled with drawings of my face under captions like "Truth has a voice." Some of it made me uncomfortable, but I understood why it mattered. People needed heroes as much as facts. Richard, on the other hand, grew increasingly desperate. In one televised interview, he shouted, red-faced, that he was the victim of a witch hunt. He claimed the Beacon was funded by foreign money. He waved papers that turned out to be meaningless printouts. Even sympathetic hosts struggled to defend him. Inside Chronicle, morale collapsed completely. Entire departments resigned. Subscribers vanished. Daniel sat in his office, staring at the walls. The phone that once rang nonstop sat silent. He scrolled through news about the Beacon with a bitter taste in his mouth. He remembered my calm defiance and felt a sharp stab of regret. One evening, he typed a resignation letter. He stared at the words but hesitated. Leaving meant admitting he had been wrong all along. Staying meant rotting in a sinking ship. He closed his laptop without sending it. At the Beacon, we pushed forward. James uncovered more details about the defense contract scandal. Sarah traveled to Washington to photograph hearings. Her pictures of stern-faced senators and crowded protests were published worldwide. Emily cataloged new whistleblower documents into our growing archive. Carol's essay, "The Price of Silence," went viral, capturing the emotional core of our fight. Michael guided us carefully through the legal storms. Kane's lawyers filed endless motions to delay. They accused the Beacon of bias, of manipulation, of theft. Michael countered each one calmly. In court, he declared, "This is not about bias. This is about facts, and the facts are overwhelming." Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered holding handmade signs, "Protect the Beacon. We stand with Vivian." Sarah photographed them from the steps, capturing the faces of ordinary citizens standing for truth. One night after a long day, I walked home alone. I passed a newsstand where the evening papers blared headlines, "Kane indicted. Independent journalists lead charge." I paused, staring at the words. For a moment, exhaustion threatened to swallow me. But then I remembered the faces of my team and straightened my shoulders. Back in the office, Olivia was waiting with a smile. "You look like you're carrying the whole world, Vivian." "Sometimes it feels like it," I admitted. Olivia put a hand on my arm. "Then let us carry it together." The team grew stronger with each passing week. New journalists joined, donations poured in steadily. Universities invited us to teach workshops. For many young reporters, the Beacon became a beacon, literally a place to learn what journalism meant when stripped of corporate greed. But challenges never stopped. Kane's allies in politics tried to stall hearings. Online trolls flooded comment sections. Threats kept coming. Some nights, Sarah cried quietly after receiving anonymous calls. James's family worried about his safety. Emily changed apartments after suspicious men appeared near her building. I gathered them one evening. "I cannot promise this will end soon," I said, "but I can promise we will face it together." James raised his glass of water again. "To together." They all echoed, "To together." Meanwhile, Chronicle gasped its last breaths. The once great magazine published fewer issues each month. Advertisers were gone. Staff was skeletal. Readers had vanished. The glossy covers that once shaped national conversations now gathered dust. For longtime journalists, it was heartbreaking. For me, it was bittersweet. Chronicle had been my home once, but it had chosen power over truth and paid the price. Richard Kane faced mounting charges. Court dates loomed. Leaks suggested former allies were cutting deals to testify against him. His empire crumbled piece by piece. His voice grew weaker with each public appearance. The once untouchable Titan was now a man drowning in his own lies, yet I reminded my team constantly, this is not victory, this is responsibility. People look to us now. We cannot become what we fought against. Her words guided them as they built new editorial policies. No anonymous sources without rigorous verification. No stories shaped by donors. Total transparency in funding. They published their financial reports publicly each quarter. Readers responded with admiration. Trust grew. At a university lecture, I told a hall full of students, journalism is not about access or fame, it is about service. If you are not serving the public, you are serving someone else. Choose carefully. The hall erupted in applause. Back in the office, Sarah hung one of her photographs on the wall. It showed the crowd outside the courthouse holding signs for the beacon. She looked at me and said, "Whenever you doubt, remember this." I smiled softly. "Thank you, Sarah." The road ahead was still long, but the worst storms had been weathered. Richard Kane was cornered. Chronicle was collapsing. And the beacon stood tall, fueled not by money or power, but by trust. For me, it was never about revenge. It was about proving one simple thing: the truth still had a place in the world. Winter melted into spring, and the city carried a restless energy. Outside the courthouse, lines of people waited each morning to witness the hearings against Richard Kane. Some brought coffee and camped for hours just to catch a glimpse of the fallen media titan. Inside the marble halls, reporters jostled for seats while cameras flashed. It felt like history unfolding in real time. In the Beacon's cramped office, my team and I followed every moment. Screens displayed live feeds. Papers covered desks. Coffee cups piled up in corners. James scribbled notes furiously as he listened to testimony. Sarah's camera bag never left her shoulder. Emily updated our website in rapid bursts. Carol drafted essays connecting each revelation to the larger story of power and corruption. Olivia coordinated with other outlets who now quoted the Beacon daily. I sat in the center of it all, calm, steady, focused. Whenever the noise threatened to overwhelm, I repeated quietly to myself, truth above everything. One morning, Michael entered with a folder and a rare smile. "Today is the day," he said. "A former Kane executive is testifying. Word is he cut a deal." We crowded around the television. The executive, a pale, nervous man, admitted under oath that Richard had personally ordered fabricated stories to smear opponents. He detailed secret meetings, threats against editors, and the use of Chronicle as a political weapon. Gasps filled the courtroom. Cameras zoomed in on Richard's clenched jaw. Sarah snapped photos of the television screen. "History," she whispered. By evening, headlines screamed across the nation. Media mogul accused of orchestrating propaganda. The Beacon's earlier stories were validated publicly. Donations to our platform surged again. Messages poured in from readers saying, "We believe you now more than ever." But victory carried weight. I reminded my team, we are not here to celebrate someone's downfall. We are here to make sure the public understands what happened. James nodded. Agreed. But tonight, maybe just a small drink. We laughed tiredly but allowed ourselves a toast. Meanwhile, inside Chronicle, the collapse accelerated. Entire floors were empty. Printers sat silent. The once grand lobby echoed with footsteps. Daniel sat in his office, staring at resignation letters piling on his desk. Finally, he typed his own, printed it out, signed it, and placed it neatly on the editor-in-chief's desk. Then he walked out without looking back. For the first time in months, he felt lighter, though the shame lingered. Back at the Beacon, new challenges arose. Our sudden fame attracted both allies and opportunists. Wealthy donors offered large sums of money. Politicians sought endorsements. Corporations wanted partnerships. I refused them all. "We are nonprofit," I reminded everyone. "No one buys our voice." Olivia supported my decision. "That is why people trust us, because we are not for sale." But turning down money meant constant financial strain. Emily juggled donation drives and small grants. Staff worked long hours for modest pay. Some nights we worried if we could keep the lights on, yet each morning we returned, driven by conviction. Sarah captured the struggle in her photographs. One image showed James asleep at his desk, papers scattered around him. Another showed me staring at a whiteboard covered in scribbles, determination etched on my face. These photos went viral, symbolizing the grit of independent journalism. Then came the moment that changed everything again. James uncovered documents showing not only media manipulation, but direct bribery of government officials. The evidence was explosive, bags of money disguised as consulting fees, vacation homes transferred quietly to senators, all tied back to Richard Kane's empire. He dropped the files on my desk. This is it, the real bombshell. I flipped through the papers, my hands steady. If we publish this, the storm will become a hurricane. Michael leaned in. Legally, it is dangerous. He will claim we stole these documents, but the public has a right to know. Carol said quietly, sometimes history demands courage more than caution. I looked around the room. We publish. We worked without sleep for 3 days, every line verified, every number checked. Emily cross-referenced data, Leo secured backups, Sarah prepared images, Olivia wrote the headline. Carol crafted the opening lines. Finally, I read it all aloud one last time. When I finished, silence filled the room. I pressed the button. The article went live at midnight. Within minutes, it spread like wildfire. By dawn, newspapers across the globe quoted it. Television anchors called it one of the most significant exposés in decades. Protesters filled streets, chanting Kane must go. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves. Richard's response was furious. He appeared outside the courthouse shouting into microphones. Lies, all lies, these criminals will pay? His voice cracked under the weight of desperation. But the evidence was undeniable. The Department of Justice expanded charges. The FBI raided offices connected to his companies. Former allies testified against him to save themselves. His empire shattered piece by piece. Through it all, the beacon remained steady. We published calmly, methodically, without gloating. I reminded my team again and again, humility is our shield, yet the toll on us was real. James developed headaches from long nights. Sarah grew anxious after constant threats. Emily barely slept keeping systems online. Carol's voice grew hoarse from endless interviews. Olivia juggled calls until her phone battery died daily, and I felt exhaustion creeping into my bones. One night, I walked alone through Central Park. The city lights glowed behind the trees. I sat on a bench and breathed deeply. A jogger passed, then recognized me. He stopped and said softly, "Thank you. My kids read your site in school now. You gave them hope." I smiled faintly. That was enough to carry me back. At the next team meeting, I told them the story. "That is why we do this," I said. "Not for headlines, for hope." They nodded. As spring turned to summer, the trial of Richard Kane drew near. The nation braced for a spectacle. Analysts predicted months of proceedings. But the weight of evidence made the outcome clear to many. The titan who once controlled narratives now faced the ultimate reckoning. And in our small office above a bookstore, the Beacon prepared for the next chapter. We knew the fight was bigger than one man. It was about an industry, a culture, a democracy. I looked at my team. "Whatever happens," I said softly, "the truth has already won." The first day of Richard Kane's trial felt like a national holiday. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse before dawn. Television vans lined the street, cameras perched like hawks. Vendors sold coffee, pretzels, even t-shirts printed with slogans like "Truth will win." Police set up barricades to control the swelling crowd. Inside, marble floors echoed with the footsteps of lawyers, reporters, and spectators eager to see justice unfold. In the Beacon's office, my team and I prepared like it was battle. James sharpened his notes with the precision of a general. Sarah charged her cameras and packed spare batteries. Emily arranged live updates for the website. Carol drafted an essay to capture the symbolism of the moment. Olivia coordinated interviews for later in the day. Michael adjusted his tie, preparing for his role as a legal analyst on national broadcasts. I stood in the center, calm but electric. I looked at each of them and said, "This is history, but remember, we are not chasing spectacle. We are chasing clarity. Our readers need to understand not just what happens, but why it matters." James smirked. "And Kane needs to understand that he cannot outrun the truth." We headed to the courthouse as a team. The crowd outside recognized us instantly. People cheered, some shouting thank you, others holding signs with the Beacon's logo. Sarah snapped quick photos, capturing the surreal moment of being celebrated for simply doing our jobs. Inside, the trial began. The prosecution laid out a sweeping case of fraud, bribery, and manipulation. They presented the documents, emails, and testimonies that we had first uncovered. Each piece landed like a hammer. The defense tried to object, to stall, but the evidence was overwhelming. From the press box, I watched closely, taking notes. Richard sat at the defense table, shoulders heavy, jaw tight. He looked smaller than I remembered. Gone was the confident titan who once controlled rooms with his presence. Now he was just a man cornered by his own arrogance. At recess, I stepped outside with James. The air buzzed with chatter. He lit a cigarette and exhaled slowly. Never thought I'd live to see the day he sat in that chair. I nodded. Power feels invincible until it is not. Back in the office, Emily updated the site. Readers flooded the comments with gratitude. Donations spiked again. Teachers wrote emails saying they were using the Beacon's coverage in classrooms. I read one aloud. "You have given my students faith that journalism still matters." That evening, my team gathered around our conference table. Sarah showed her photos from the day, Richard's downcast eyes, the stern faces of jurors, the crowds outside chanting for truth. Carol read her draft essay, her voice steady. "This trial is more than the fall of one man. It is a test of whether democracy can still correct itself." The room went quiet as we absorbed her words. I finally said, "Publish it." Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in his apartment watching the coverage on television. His phone no longer rang. His inbox was empty. He saw me on the screen, calm and determined, and I knew the hollow ache in his chest because I had once been in that position myself. He poured himself a drink and whispered to no one, "I chose wrong." Back at the courthouse, the trial intensified. Whistleblowers took the stand. Former employees described the fear they lived under. One by one, they painted a picture of an empire built on lies. Richard's lawyers fought desperately, but the walls closed in. I listened to each testimony with quiet intensity. Pride swelled in me that our work had given these people courage, but I also felt sorrow for the years of silence they had endured. I scribbled in my notebook, "Truth delayed is pain prolonged." Outside, protests grew larger. Sarah's photos captured families holding candles at night vigils, chanting softly for accountability. Emily posted them online with simple captions, "The people are watching." The Beacon's audience exploded. What had begun as a small site now rivaled major outlets in influence. But I reminded my team daily, popularity is dangerous. We must stay humble. One night after court, we gathered in the office. Everyone looked exhausted. James rubbed his temples. Sarah sipped tea with shaking hands. Emily yawned into her sleeve. I stood before them. "You are tired, I know," I said, "but look at what we have done. We turned evidence into accountability. We turned fear into courage, and we did it without selling our souls." James raised his glass. "To souls intact." We echoed softly, "To souls intact." As the trial moved into closing arguments, the tension in the nation grew. Commentators speculated about verdicts. Polls showed plummeting trust in corporate media but soaring trust in independent outlets like the Beacon. Universities studied our model. Journalists worldwide wrote about our rise, yet I refused to be distracted. I sat in the courtroom each day, focused on the facts. I watched Richard closely, noting how he avoided eye contact, how his hands trembled slightly. I wrote in my notebook, "Truth strips power of its disguise." Finally, the jury retired to deliberate. The city held its breath. Outside the courthouse, crowds waited day and night. News anchors filled hours with speculation. Inside the Beacon's office, silence reigned. I stood at the window, looking at the skyline. My team sat behind me, fidgeting, whispering, waiting. Sarah finally asked, "What if he walks free?" I turned to face them. "Then we keep fighting, because justice is not a verdict, it is a pursuit." They nodded, steadied by my words. When the call came that the jury had reached a decision, the city erupted into anticipation. My team and I rushed to the courthouse, pushing through the throngs of reporters and supporters. We squeezed into the press box, hearts pounding. The judge asked the foreperson for the verdict. "Guilty," the foreperson said, voice clear. "Guilty on all counts." The courtroom gasped. Outside, the crowd roared. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Richard slumped in his chair, face pale, eyes hollow. The once mighty mogul was finished. I sat frozen for a moment, then exhaled slowly. James gripped my shoulder. "We did it," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "The people did it. We only carried their voice." Outside, the crowd erupted in chants. The Beacon team stood together on the courthouse steps. Reporters thrust microphones at me. I spoke calmly, my words carrying above the din. "This verdict is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of a reminder that truth still matters, that courage is possible, and that journalism belongs to the people, not to power." The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. Sarah captured the moment in a photograph that would later hang on walls across the world. That night, in our small office, we celebrated with pizza and laughter. Emily streamed messages from readers. "Thank you for restoring my faith. Thank you for proving that truth can win. Thank you for reminding us we are not powerless." I looked around at my team, James smiling for the first time in months, Sarah's eyes bright, Emily exhausted but glowing, Carol jotting notes even during celebration, Olivia answering calls with a grin, Leo asleep at his desk after another battle with servers, Michael raising a glass quietly. Tears stung my eyes. This was not just a team. This was family. I whispered to myself, we carried the light. And the light had spread farther than I ever dreamed. The months after Richard Kane's sentencing brought a strange quiet to the city. For years his empire had dominated headlines, but now his name appeared only in the context of prison updates. The mighty mogul had fallen, and people slowly turned their attention back to everyday struggles. Yet the echoes of his trial lingered everywhere, in classrooms, in newsrooms, in late-night conversations at diners. For the Beacon, the quiet was only on the outside. Inside our modest but bustling newsroom, the energy never slowed. New reporters arrived eager to join the mission. The hum of keyboards filled the space. Phones rang constantly. The whiteboard once used to scribble strategies now displayed an overflowing calendar of investigations, interviews, and publishing deadlines. I walked through the room each morning with a cup of coffee in my hand. I greeted every reporter by name, asked about their stories, reminded them to fact-check twice. I insisted on maintaining the culture we had built: rigorous truth, humility, and service. James remained the old lion, mentoring younger reporters. He leaned over desks, pointing out weaknesses in drafts. He barked advice, but always with a spark of pride in his eyes. I walked through the newsroom, the hum of typing and muted conversation filling the air. Sarah's camera clicks in the corner, Emily's fingers dance across keyboards, and Leo mutters at a firewall as if arguing with it. James shuffles papers with the same gruff precision I've come to trust. Carol writes, Olivia coordinates, Michael strategizes. This is the Beacon, our heartbeat, our fight, our family. We accomplished something historic, I tell them one evening, the sun dipping behind the skyline, but we must never become complacent. Corruption doesn't vanish, it adapts. If we want to honor what we built, we must keep pushing, James smirks. You mean no vacation? I smile faintly. We get the privilege of purpose. Their laughter is tired but real, and I know they understand. The Beacon's reach spreads, millions reading our stories, our essays cited in universities, our investigations sparking debate. Yet influence carries responsibility. Trust is fragile, and I repeat it like a mantra. One compromise can shatter it. We launch fellowships, mentorship programs, ethics trainings. I speak at universities, always the same message. Journalism is not about fame, it's about truth, even when it costs you everything. If you aren't ready to pay that price, don't step into this field. Students sit in silence, then erupt in applause, and I remind myself why we fight. Chronicle limps along, a ghost of what it once was. Daniel's career falters, doors close where they once opened. I see him in my mind sometimes, staring at screens, whispering, that could have been me. Regret doesn't change the past, and yet the work never ends. Emily uncovers new shell companies, others trying to replicate Kane's corruption. I study the files. Then we investigate, I say. This is why we exist. We dive in, James tracing money flows, Sarah capturing proof, Carol weaving essays, Olivia protecting sources, Michael advising on law, Leo fortifying servers. Long nights blur into early mornings. Sometimes James murmurs, we traded one war for another. I reply softly, truth is not a war you win once, it's a war you fight every day. Our exposés shake the system, corporations funneling millions, politicians resigning, citizens protesting. Offers from wealthy donors come, partnerships from corporations, seats on panels. I refuse each time. If help comes with strings, it is not help, it is a leash. The team grumbles at times, resources tight, but we remain free. One evening, Sarah approaches, concern in her eyes. You never stop carrying the weight, do you? I smile faintly. Someone has to, she hugs me, but don't forget you're human too. I close my eyes for a moment, grateful for the reminder. The Beacon becomes more than a newsroom, it's a movement. Citizens trust us, teachers use our essays, activists leverage our reports. I watch it grow, knowing success is not ours, it belongs to the truth. A whistleblower calls from inside the Senate, terrified. I have files, they whisper. But my career is gone if I hand them over. I reply softly, careers can return, truth once buried is gone forever. Days later, Emily verifies hundreds of pages of financial records. James cross-checks numbers. It's undeniable, millions flowing in secret. I gather the team. We write carefully. Truth is our armor, not a weapon. Weeks pass in fevered work. Every number checked, every line scrutinized. Sarah's photographs capture haunting clarity. Carol frames it in moral terms. Olivia coordinates. Emily fortifies systems. Leo hides backups. Michael ensures legal precision. On a Sunday night, I press publish. The headline, Bought and Sold, How Corporations Purchased Our Senators. By dawn, the nation erupts. Citizens flood streets demanding resignations. Other outlets acknowledge the truth we uncovered. Senators scramble, some resign, protests swell. Backlash is immediate. Trolls, lawsuits, threats. Sarah finds red paint marking her apartment door. I gather the team. Fear their noise, I say quietly. Fear only losing the truth. James growls, they should fear us, we are not backing down. Emily smiles faintly. Because we are not alone anymore. Look at the donations, the letters, the marches. Letters arrive, children drawing lighthouses calling the beacon their light, elderly couples thanking us for returning their voice. I read one aloud, this is why we endure. The senators face resignation, indictment, public disgrace. Citizens demand reforms. The beacon is cited, studied, emulated, but I remind the team daily, success is responsibility. Sarah shows me a photograph, a girl at a vigil sign reading, when I grow up, I want to be like the beacon. I whisper, then we must be worthy of her dream. Autumn settles over the city, leaves swirl along sidewalks, lamps glow through the beacon's windows. Inside, the newsroom hums, ordinary chaos with extraordinary purpose. I stand by the window, notebook in hand, recalling the first nights in the bookstore office, the fear, the exhaustion, and the victories. I whisper, we kept the promise. Chronicle is gone, Cain imprisoned, Daniel a cautionary tale. Yet the beacon endures, not because of one person but many, James, Sarah, Emily, Carol, Olivia, Leo, Michael, and myself. On the anniversary of our founding, we sit in the old bookstore office, laughing at broken chairs and late-night pizza, reminiscing about beginnings. James raises his glass. To beginnings. To beginnings, we echo. I look around at my family, my team, my fellow soldiers in the war for truth. I speak softly, carrying the weight and pride. One newsroom, even a small one, can make a difference. Integrity is stronger than intimidation. Truth is not fragile if we protect it together. Journalism still matters. Silence, applause, laughter, tears. I walk alone through the city streets that night. Posters read truth wins, candle wax melts on sidewalks. I think of my parents, the young girl, the countless citizens who supported us. I sit on a bench, looking at the stars. I whisper, the truth still has a place. Always. Then I rise, walk back to the newsroom, and join my team once more. The beacon's light shines steady, unyielding. A promise, a reminder, a beginning.